And joining us now is Representative Collier from Fort Worth. So we know, though, that this election bill has been talked about a lot, and that was a big focus toward the end of the regular legislative session. Have Democrats been huddling about this? I know you can't, tell us everything that you hear in internal meetings, but have Democrats been huddling about this and talking about the possibility that maybe they would employ that tactic of walking out again, if necessary, to prevent something from going forward in a special session?
Well, of course, we want to be able to utilize all the tools in our toolbox and follow the procedural rules in terms of being able to oppose any type of harmful legislation. But we don't even know what that legislation looks like. So I don't believe it's appropriate at this time to say walk out now. I think that we need to see what is filed and how the proceedings go, and then make that call as to whether it's the nuclear option, which is your last resort option of walking out. And pretty much, the governor could call about 17 special sessions. They last 30 days, and he could call us back every month, technically, until he gets what he wants. So, we have to make sure that we're looking at the whole picture before making a decision to walk out.
There's been some talk that maybe Republicans might be a little bit more inclined to make some deals in this special session with some of these other items to sort of create a nice working relationship, if you will, so that Democrats can't delay redistricting as we head into the primaries next year. Do you think that there is a possibility that maybe we go into this special session and maybe some, pretty tough issues are on the agenda here, and that maybe we find some level of bipartisanship?
Look, anything's possible. I mean, I'm glad to hear that you're hearing that there's concern, there's a consensus or a desire to work together. That's always what we would envision with our Texas legislature, is being able to work and hash out our differences to have the best legislation for all Texans. But sometimes that just doesn't happen. And we realize that. But of course, with redistricting, we already knew that the governor was going to call us back for that when the census numbers come out later this fall. So we know that that's going to be on the call eventually. Whether that's going to be the pinpoint where that's going to cause Republicans and Democrats to work together, I don't know. Again, we have 67 Democrats in the Texas legislature. It's not enough to carry anything on its own. They have the votes to pass just about most of the legislation that they want.
Are there some things, a couple of things that pop to your mind that we should desperately attempt to take up in a special session now that we're, in this season?
Oh, well, that's a loaded question. Of course, there's so many things that we could take up. The reason why, in the legislature, we cannot take up legislation for the first 60 days. We can't pass any bills, and that's to give cooler heads to prevail. But that also limits the ability of us to pass solid legislation. I'd really like to see us shore up our infrastructure and provide additional guidance and legislation surrounding our infrastructure. When we had that winter storm Uri, there's still more that we can do. Of course, with education, there's always more that we can do. But it just seems like a lot of the far right issues are making it back and to the forefront. When you're talking about the governor saying that he's going to bring back critical race theory, or a bill to deal with elections, when our former Secretary of State said our elections were safe, secure, and successful.
Yep, and we'll see what gets done in this week ahead as we begin this special session, maybe the first of who knows how many of these. Representative Collier of Fort Worth, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.